Everyone, so welcome back. Today I want to talk a little bit about the 2 or 3 types of motivation, so please stick around. Okay, so what are the 2 or 3 types of motivation? Before I get into the talk though, as always, want to give a sincere thank you to all my patrons on Patreon and everyone who donates via PayPal and Venmo. They really make it possible for me to do these talks. So a lot of gratitude and thanks to them. Okay. So this is a talk about motivation. Why do we do what we do? Okay, so I think this is a very important topic actually. I've counseled and talked with several younger people, and this may be an issue for younger people, but I think it's something we can address at any age, and it's something that is relevant at any age. So again, why do we do what we do? Why do we get out of bed in the morning? Why do we do anything? If we go to a job, why do we go to the job? Is that just to get paid, or is there another thing that's going on? So it's 2 or 3 types of motivation, because really there's 2. But it can seem like 3, so I want to talk about sort of them as 3 categories. So the first type of motivation we can have, well, the 2, let me split it up that way first. Basically, love and fear is a very basic way to think of it. So fear is, I go to my job, or let's say it's your job that you're doing. I do my job because I'm afraid that if I don't, I won't get paid and I'll be homeless. Okay, and you might be right. So I'm not saying that that's not a consideration. But it also shouldn't be the only consideration. And I'm not sure it should even be a consideration. But let's just for now say that, okay, if you really think you're going to be on the street, then yes, you need to go to work, because if you don't, you won't get paid, and if you don't get paid, you're going to be out on the street. Maybe though. A lot of times I think we think that, and that's not actually the case, but this really isn't the topic today. Okay? So fear. I go to work because if I don't, I won't get paid, I'm going to be homeless, my children will starve, whatever it might be. So why are you doing? So again, this might be why you go to your job. I'm afraid I'll get fired. I'm afraid I won't make any money. Fear. Okay, it's pretty simple. It's not that hard to actually figure out or it may not be even work. It might be school. Why are you going to school? Because I'm afraid if I don't, I won't get a good job. I'm going to be poor, whatever it is. Now this is as opposed to love. Okay, so love, why do you do what you do? Why do you go to school? Because I love school. I love to learn. I find my professors interesting. It may not be 100%, so maybe you love studying medicine and your other subjects, you don't really like them. But for the most part, you love learning, and you love the reason that you're there, which is to study medicine. So again, love versus fear. Why do you go to school? Oh, because I'm afraid I won't get a good job. Well, do you like what you're studying? No, I don't know what I want to do. So why are you studying what you're studying? Well, because I think I'm going to make a lot of money. Why do you think you need a lot of money? Well, because I think I need a lot of money to be happy. If I don't have a lot of money, I'm going to be happy. I'm afraid I'll be poor if I don't study something that's going to make me a lot of money. So again, love or fear, love or fear. It's really not that complicated once you really break it down to love or fear, okay? So why do you do what you do? Is it because you love what you're doing? Is love motivating you? Or is it fear? I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. This is a very important distinction, actually, okay? So we can look at everything in our life through this lens. Everything that we do. Am I motivated by love or am I motivated by fear? I will say I think that's a worthwhile exercise. Sitting down, looking at how you spend your time during your day, what you do, and again, just seeing, is it love or is it fear? That's definitely worthwhile doing. Okay, so with love, I find that there can be a few different things that happen. And I just wanted to explore these a little bit because, again, I think especially for younger people, some of the younger people I've counseled, they, I think, need to hear this, and it's important. So there are kind of two, I find anyway, in my life, and I think this is true of other people too, there's sort of two love motivators. One is what I'll call passion. This is just what gets you excited. This is what you enjoy doing, what you can lose hours or days doing. That's passion, okay? It's just there's a fire there, you get into a flow state, you feel alive. Now, here's the thing about passion is you may not make a dime doing it. It might be something like music or art. It may be writing poetry. It may be hiking, swimming, biking. It might be listening to music. It could be any number of things. And again, they may not be career-oriented. They just might be sports or something like that. And it's just something that you are passionate about, you love to do. So this is one type of love motivation. It may not pay the bills. And it might sort of pay the bills, or it may one day pay the bills, you know. It could, depending on what it is. So again, if it's something like art or music, poetry, writing, you know, some people are passionate about math, or medicine, healing. So, you know, if your passion is medicine, then you can make a good living doing that, right? So again, this is just individually. Some people are gifted with something that they can make money at. Their passion aligns with something that can make them a good living. It's maybe an easy path. There's an academic road, or society has kind of laid out a foundation for that. For music, and I know because I'm a musician, for things like art and music, very often there isn't a easy, clear path. It's not like go to school and then you're guaranteed a good paying job in music or anything like that. It can be a lot more tricky. And the other thing about making money with passion is that, in my experience anyway, passion can be very finicky. So I love playing the guitar and playing music, but not all the time, and not the same thing all the time. So, you know, if I'm playing even music that I wrote, and I'm doing it too often, or it's in a certain kind of a stifled environment or setting, if it's too repetitive, I start to get burned out very quickly. And this is the interesting thing about passion, is that it can just sort of like, you're not feeling it anymore. Now it starts to become kind of a chore. So again, everyone's different, and their path might be different. But for me, I found that the things that I'm truly passionate about in that way, very often that's not the best way for me to make most of my money. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case for you, but that's been my experience. I've always made money from making music, but it's never been enough to live off of. So I'm what you would consider semi-professional, because I can perform and play at a high enough level that I could be a professional. But the reason I'm not a professional is what I was talking about, is if I were to take my passion and turn it to profession, at least every time I've gotten close to doing that, it stops being my passion. I hope that makes sense. You know, once it's something that I have to do, then there's a certain kind of fire that goes out. And again, I don't think it's that way for everybody. I think there are musicians and artists who they show up and they're just everyday passionate about it. But I've just found that my muse, if you will, it will sort of float around. So I'll be passionate about one kind of music for a while, exploring music in one way, maybe recording in my studio, and then I will just sort of burn out on that after a while. And then I'll find that there's a lot of energy maybe around performing live, maybe doing kirtan, and I'll do that for a while. And then at a certain point, very often, again, if I continue, then it just starts to be a job. That energy, that passion isn't there. So that's what I call spirit. Spirit moves you. There's an energy there. In yoga, that could be called Shakti, or even possibly Kundalini, depending on how you want to define those terms. But one of my teachers used to say, like, let the Shakti move you. Let that passion, that spirit, that energy move you in the world. And again, interestingly, it may not always move you in a way that you're going to make billions of dollars. I don't really think we need to all make billions of dollars, or even millions of dollars, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think wealth and things like that are maybe, at least from a spiritual perspective, much less important than we tend to put a lot of emphasis on. And we may end up losing certain ineffable qualities, certain ineffable things, because we want wealth. So one example might be freedom. Now, what does freedom really mean? But if you look at, having to make a lot of money because you have a lot of stuff, you need a big house, you have a big mortgage, you have a big car payment, well, you're probably not as free as if you had a small mortgage or no car payment, right? You have more options if you don't have all this stuff. You could quit your job, right? And you could get a job that pays less, but perhaps you enjoy more. So anyway, this isn't the topic today, but it's worth considering that yes, money might be important to a degree, but like so many things, there's sort of a intangible crossover point where it's like, okay, I need money to do these things, and then at some point we can cross over into where it's like, is more money actually bringing us more happiness? Because again, we might just think more money, more money, more money, more good. But actually, At what point does more money mean less freedom? And I'm not saying it's an all or nothing thing, right? Freedom, again, is a tricky concept. It can be. What does that really mean to be free? But again, it's worth considering that perhaps in that endeavor to simply make more money and thinking that more money is going to give me more options, that's not necessarily true, not in every way. Very often, pursuing more money may close doors and close off certain options, okay? Okay, so we have that first kind of love motivation. And again, I'll just call that passion. And if you've ever loved, again, drawing or biking or hiking or swimming or sports or dance or any of these types of things, then you probably understand what I'm talking about. I think most people have experienced that with something. You may have turned your back on that a long time ago, but I think that that's an important thing to be aware of. So what is the other kind? And again, really, I think love is just love. But it can seem, I think, to us like there's these two different things. And they are experienced slightly differently by me. So the other one is maybe not something that you're passionate about, but you have a gift for. So this is something that's interesting to me because right now, I think that those of you who watched my last talk, I've mentioned how I'm starting to do training to work with people to help them resolve trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, repression, repressed feelings, things like that. All of these kinds of things that are roots of the egoic structure. So it's not different of also addiction. So for me, this is all part of spirituality. It's just part of the more psychological end of things. Just as, yoga postures can help us heal our body, the internal part of yoga can help us heal our heart and mind, and I actually think that's the more powerful part of it. In recent years, I've become more and more aware of areas where I feel like the approach we take in spirituality could be improved. That maybe there are some gaps in something like the Buddhist or the yogic tradition. Or maybe another way of looking at it is maybe there are no gaps, but maybe there's newer technology, spiritual technology that's available to us. And when I say spiritual technology, I just mean spiritual techniques. I don't really mean like, let's use this headset or let's put on some special spiritual headphones and use brain waves. That's not what I'm talking about. That stuff might be coming and that's great. But I'm talking about pulling up the roots of the egoic structure and dissolving them, which is something I've been doing a long time. And I've been doing that using very ancient but effective methods, meditation and Kundalini techniques. So again, I draw from two main sources, which is the Buddhist and the tantric yogic tradition. But then I also draw a lot on Christian teaching and Taoist teaching as well. But I'm perhaps less familiar with those traditions, but I still draw on them. And there's a little smattering of Sufism in there as well. I really like Rumi a lot. So we have this. So anyway, my point was I'm in training now. And I got motivated to do this from working with some of you one-on-one. As many of you know, the pandemic hit and many people reached out to me, and I started doing a lot more of what I would maybe call counseling or coaching, sort of like talking with people. And usually these sessions were basically like giving people the perspective from the awake point of view. And most of my students have at least some awakeness. They've woken up, you could say, and they may from time to time get a little confused or disoriented, and that's where these types of sessions are helpful. We sit down and I simply kind of remind them of what they already know. That's kind of a good way of thinking of it. I'm just kind of like, hey, you know, here's how I see it. And usually, very often, that's enough, and they're off on their way back on the path, you might say. But I began to encounter some instances where there was deeper, might say darker roots that were deeply buried, where I began to feel a little bit like I was in less familiar territory for me. And I began to explore this with certain students, but I felt like, you know, I felt like I'm having to figure out something new. That's how it felt to me. And I felt like I could, but it felt like, I wonder if someone else has done this before and I could like learn from them. So I found a teacher that I was aware of, and I began to study with him. And he does a lot of work with, you know, trauma and addiction and repression, because he runs several addiction centers. So he's had the opportunity to do thousands of sessions with people in varying states of spiritual awareness, right? Someone who's strung out on heroin may have no awareness of Buddha or Dharma or yoga, no interest either. They're really interested in their next fix. That's it. So he's worked with people like that, and he's also worked with people who had maybe quite a fair amount of awakeness and everything in between, thousands and thousands of sessions. So from my perspective, I was like, why reinvent the wheel? If there's someone who's done what I'm doing, what I'm starting to do, and learn certain things, then I'm not going to, you know, beat my head against the wall and experiment with students to figure out what works when someone else has already done that. And so I paid to do this training, and it's rather expensive to do the training. But I did it because I want to offer this to you. Now my point is that in doing the training, I'm getting really, really positive feedback. I'm being told that I'm way ahead of where most people are at that time. And it, again, it reminds me of when I was starting to train as a yoga teacher. And I'm not trying to boast here, so I want to be very clear about that. I'm just actually stating facts. So I'm not, you know, telling you anything that isn't actually just factually true. This is what I'm being told, and I'm being told by people who I have a lot of respect for, and people who wouldn't tell me this just to make me feel good. I've had a few sessions where I'm leading people through this work, and I've been observed directly by my teacher, where he's listening in on the counseling session, essentially. And I've gotten very, very positive feedback. Now, my point is that this is my gift. And so this is another love motivation. So it's interesting, because if when I was in my 20s, you said, hey, you know what? You're going to be a spiritual teacher. You're going to teach yoga, and you're going to help people with trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder and addiction and alcoholism, I would have laughed in your face. I would have had zero interest in doing that. I would have had zero passion about doing that. There's nothing in my mind in my early 20s that made me think that this is a calling for me or that this is something I should do. And interestingly, the similar thing with philosophy, which was another thing, another gift, you might say. And I use philosophy in yoga all the time. Yoga is there's a philosophy to yoga, right? I think a lot of us in this country, unfortunately, think of yoga as fitness. Well, there isn't fitness philosophy. There isn't exercise philosophy. Yoga is a very rich tradition, and the philosophy predates anything we would recognize as exercise. Okay, so the philosophy is more fundamental to yoga than the exercise that we all pay for at the yoga studios. So my point is that, again, there was my personal passion, and that is important from my perspective. My personal passion is, again, when I was really young, I enjoyed the drawing, art, like visual art, stuff like that. As I got a little older, that seemed to fall away for the most part, and I became very interested in music and sound, and that has remained true to this day. And I use that in my teaching. That took about 7 years after starting to teach professionally before it felt, I'll say this, I felt called to integrate music into my teaching. So when I first started teaching, many people said, oh, you're a musician, you should do kirtan, you should do chanting. Well, and I played around a little bit with it, and it did not feel authentic to me. It did not feel right. And it took about 7 years. And then, again, from my perspective, spirit moved me. I remember being on a retreat. It was the last retreat of my winter meditation retreats. And I came off of that, and I just had this feeling, we need to do chanting in November, because I usually have a big retreat in November. This is all pre-COVID. So I would do 3 meditation retreats that were smaller in the winter months, so January, February, March, and then I would have a bigger one in November. And it was for that November retreat, I was like, okay, we need to have some kirtan and chanting for that, and we did. And so that's an area where you could say my passion and my gift intersected, right? So philosophy was one area where, again, when in school, I didn't have a passion about philosophy, but when I ended up almost by mistake in a advanced like AP style philosophy class in my high school, I was just acing it. I didn't break a sweat. It was just really easy for me. It was like a fish in water. Same for my yoga teacher training and getting into teaching yoga. This was super easy, which for somebody like me who struggled in his younger life to find work, to find what am I going to do to make a living, because most jobs I felt completely just dead. And I tried different things. I worked at music stores, I worked in restaurants, worked in cafes. I tried working online and doing, web stuff, so semi kind of creative and technical. Nothing felt right until I started teaching yoga. And that, again, if you had said when I was 20, if you said, oh, you might teach philosophy one day, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. I wanted to play music. But again, interestingly, anytime, and I've tried being a professional musician before too, and I've had some success with that. But again, every time I've really focused on music as my primary way of making a living, it's actually kind of killed it for me. Whereas teaching yoga isn't like that. It isn't like that. And this is a gift that I have that I can share with others. And this is really where I really would want young people or anyone who's still kind of confused about what they should be doing. This is where I would look, like, what are your gifts? And share those with people. Use those gifts to enrich and help other people. And don't worry about the money. So if you can live at home, or I don't know, have roommates, or you can find a situation where you're not panicked about money. What gifts do you have? What are you passionate about? Can you share those gifts? Find a way of uplifting others with those gifts, of sharing your gifts and being of service. So some of you have heard me say this before, being of service. So again, for me, yoga was the first thing that I found that was the case. And what's been interesting to me is how my passion and what my talent was with yoga, they merged eventually. And again, philosophy, yoga is a big part of yoga, and a big part of the way I teach yoga is the philosophy. So what's been interesting about how spirit moved me in my life is the philosophy, which again was a gift. It's just something I'm good at. I am interested in it, but I don't spend hours and hours and hours at home just reading philosophy for fun. I do spend hours and hours and hours at home making music. So just so you understand that distinction, philosophy is interesting to me. It's easy for me, and I just get it. But it's not the kind of thing I would probably rather go for a hike than to read a philosophy book. And that's not the case for everybody. Some people will sit down and spend hours reading philosophy. So again, this is the passion versus the gift. It's philosophy, understanding philosophy, being able to digest that, being able to see that very naturally that's just a gift. It's just something I had. And then yoga, same thing. And now doing this type of counseling, which again, I've actually done that with students. I've done singles, or individual counseling for people. You can call it life coaching or really whatever you want. I don't really have a name for it, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes. If you're a counselor or a therapist or whatever, I don't think I can have that title because I'm not getting a degree. I'm getting essentially a certification here. But from my perspective, this is actually more powerful than, say, what I've seen and heard about psychology. The feedback I'm getting about the techniques that I'm learning and the ones that I've used is many people who've actually gone to therapy and done that, they've had better success with what I'm doing. So anyway, for me, I would rather do this than go to school and get a psychology degree or whatever it is. This, I think, is actually more powerful, ultimately. So this is what's happening with me now. I'm in training, and again, I see where I just have the knack or the gift for this. And again, this is the love motivation, and this is the finding what you're good at, and what people get value from. And I love doing that work because, again, it is powerful and it is really beautiful to help people. And I can't speak for every profession because I don't know, but I suspect most professions are ultimately about helping people. Even if you're a cash register, you work at a store and you run a cash register, which I've done, by the way. So there's nothing wrong with that job. It's a great job. You get to interact with a lot of people depending on where you work, and it can be very challenging, again, because of the personal interaction, but it can also be very invigorating. So if you're working at a cash register, you are helping people. If you are a school teacher, I mean, you are helping or serving people ultimately. If you're punching tickets at a movie theater, you know, if you're a garbage person, I mean, these jobs are essentially about helping other people. Not all jobs are glamorous, and you know, I get that. But if we can think in terms of what gifts do I have, and how do I use those gifts to serve my fellow human being and uplift them, then I think that is really the way to look at work and to be motivated for work. So I don't know, maybe there is someone who really loves running a register at a you know, a Walmart or at a coffee shop like I used to do. I didn't mind that job that much. It did feel like I had other gifts. And that's another thing, another tip-off I'll share with you. Any job that I worked, like working at the music shop, even though it was related with music, it still felt this way. Working in the restaurant as a waiter, working in a cafe, working you know, as essentially a secretary at an office. I've, you know, worked many jobs. I started working when I was young. I always felt like I was not using my gifts. I always felt like, you know, why am I doing this? Like, this isn't where my, well, one, it wasn't where my passion was, but again, I'm not necessarily passionate about yoga per se in the same way that I am about music. It doesn't mean that I don't think yoga is super important and that I don't, you know, that isn't my calling. But there's something about music for me, again, that it's just sort of like this passion thing. But again, I don't think that means that that's what I should necessarily be doing. With yoga, it's just, again, the fish in the water. And that's what I'm finding now as I begin working on this certification to begin helping people with these deeper issues like, you know, repression and trauma and addiction, is fish in water. And this is what I would like, you know, to share with anyone who's, again, wondering about their path, their job. Are they in the right job? You know, how do they decide all these kinds of things? Again, in all those other jobs, I felt like I was being underutilized. And again, those aren't bad jobs. It's not, I'm not saying, oh, this job is below me. It really is, this isn't where my gifts are. This also isn't where my passion is. So I think if either of those things had been met, then I would find the job satisfying. So I think for some people, maybe those two line up. And maybe for me, and maybe for other people, they don't. I don't know. Again, I really can only guess. I don't know if, you know, Sting or Bono, every day that they go to work, they're like excited and passionate about what they're doing. Maybe. You know, I really don't know. I know when I go to teach, I am excited and I'm grateful. But again, there is a different quality from, say, when I'm sitting down and making music. And the other difference I'll say is, as I said before, music, it can get where the muse sort of leaves me. And there, again, it's almost like a fire, and then that fire can die down for a while or disappear for a while. Whereas with yoga, it's much more steady. So again, this is an interesting thing to consider, where it's like the one is sort of hot and cold. It's very exciting and passionate, but then there also can be periods where it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't feel moved to do that. Or I need to dig to find the energy and the passion. Yoga tends not to be that way for me, where it tends to be if I show up and the students are there, the energy is there. It's a community thing. So it could be that it would be that way with music too. I don't know, but in my experience, I don't think so. It's not how it's been. I've had musical performances before where there are people there, my friends are playing with me, and I wasn't feeling it. And to be honest with you, that's sort of the worst feeling in the world, because here you are doing what you're supposedly passionate about, and there's no passion there. The closest thing I could think of, maybe drawing a comparison, is like depression. If you've ever experienced deep depression, you can do what you normally enjoy and there's just no joy in it. So you might normally love hiking, or you might normally love ice cream or going out to eat, and when you're depressed you can do those things and you do not derive pleasure or joy from them. They're just sort of flat. And so that's essentially what it's like. All right, everyone. Well, I hope this was of value to you, sharing this with you. Love or fear, this is really moment by moment. We're motivated by one or the other. And today I sort of talked a little bit more, again, about maybe kind of career and job and things like that, because for most modern people like us, this is something we need to consider. And, as always, it's not always about your job. It might be how you spend your days. So I think, raising children is also, you can say it's a job. You don't make money doing it, but it's what you do during the day. So again, how do you spend your time? If you're independently wealthy or your spouse makes a lot of money, then volunteering might be something that you do. So again, where do you volunteer? How do you spend your time? Where do you put your energy? So these are two forms for me that love takes. One is the sort of passion, and I describe that, and that's still a part of my life, and it's an important part of my life. So just because we don't make money with and again, for some people it might be joined. So some people, passion and gift might go together. And I'm not saying I'm not gifted at music. Again, I've been able to make money with music pretty much right from the start. And so if, again, I could sustain that passion, if it had a different kind of quality, I could easily make my living doing that. But that's just never felt right for me. So for me, passion, it's a part of my life. It's even a part of how I make my living, but I don't rely on that, because again, whenever I've done that, the kind of flame, the passion has gone out. And then again, gift. So I'm gifted musically, and again, I'm just sort of talking factually here. I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything like that, but I know I could make a living doing that. I know I can get paid to do that. Not everybody can. You need to be gifted in order to do that. But the other place where I have other gifts that maybe is where people need me more. I don't know. Or again, maybe the fact that I'm not so passionate is actually helpful, and maybe that lends a sort of steadiness to it. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you, your experience with these, if you see this at play in your own life. I know many of us, we just grin and bear the grind. And I don't want to make it sound like my life has been easy, anything but. I've had a lot of financial struggles when I was younger. I've had a lot of difficulty finding a way to make a steady living. And once I found it in yoga, I still don't make a great living. So it's still a struggle. So please don't listen to this talk and think like I'm giving you financial advice or anything like that. Again, my teaching is always about spirit and the spiritual. And the spirit and spiritual isn't always going to match up with the sort of modern American idea of success and wealth and all that stuff. I think in modern times we love this idea of the secret and a lot of this stuff of manifestation, and that sort of crept into spirituality more and more. And yeah, it's okay, I guess, but I actually think spirituality is not so much about success as the world sees it and necessarily getting what we want, because a lot of times the deep spiritual insights and questioning come from not getting what we want. So there's a lot there. All right, everyone, as always, thank you for listening. Again, I'd love to hear your experience with this in the comments. Do you have passion in your life? Have you pushed that aside because of your job and family life? You just say, well, I don't have time for that, or is that still there, even if you don't make a living? Or do you find your passion and your gift and how you make your living align, and you're able to sort of keep your flame and do that for a living? Or have you pursued your passion and turned it into a job, and maybe you've lost the flame? Maybe you don't enjoy doing that anymore. I think all of these are possible outcomes. So I'd love to hear your experience. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until next time, namaste and have a great day.